This week's episode of The Mandalorian, titled Chapter 15, The Believer, featured Din Djarin along with Boba Fett, Fennec Shand, and Cara Dune recruiting Mayfeld's help to infiltrate an Imperial base in order to locate Moff Gideon and rescue Grogu from captivity. This episode chose to slow down a bit compared to previous episodes, and I mean that in a good way. We had some pretty huge bombs dropped with Chapter 13 and 14, unveiling the live-action returns of Ahsoka Tano and Boba Fett, the latter being given a stronger presence in the series. And although this has been amazing for us Star Wars fans, I think the show needed to scale back a bit and focus more solely on the Mandalorian's exclusive characters and storylines like Din, Cara, Gideon, etc. This episode did just that, while utilizing Boba's familiarity and presence to help maintain that epic Star Wars feel. This episode starts out with Din and the crew flying to what appears to be the Carthon Chop Fields, a New Republic junkyard planet that serves as a worksite for prisoners. We find Mayfeld here as a prisoner, and Cara Dune, now a Republic Marshal, uses her authority to release him in order to recruit his aid in finding Moff Gideon. While aboard the Slave One, Mayfeld and the crew go over the plan, and he explains how he needs access to an internal Imperial terminal which would be behind enemy lines. This takes them to a mining facility on the tropical planet Morak. When they land on the planet, they devise a plan to intercept a transport carrying the highly explosive material known as Rhydonium, which will allow them to infiltrate the secret Imperial base undetected. Mayfeld and Din assign themselves as infiltrators while Cara, Fennec, and Boba stay back to cover their escape. As Mayfeld points out, this plan would require Din to compromise his oath not to remove his helmet, but Din makes up the excuse that he will at least not be showing his face as he will be wearing armor stolen off of one of the Imperial troopers driving the transport. After Cara takes out the drivers, Mayfeld and Din take the armor along with the transport as planned, and Cara returns to her post with Fennec. Along the way in the transport, Mayfeld interestingly points out to Din how, despite not showing his face, Din was still compromising his Mandalorian creed, and if you can't realistically follow that creed all the way, why follow it at all? While passing a group of Morak natives, Mayfeld also points out how, regardless of whatever side you're on, war negatively affects innocents like those they were passing. This provides insight to Mayfeld's neutrality as he labels himself as a survivor. I appreciated this scene because despite the Empire being a clearly evil force to fight against, it reminds us of how not all things are black and white. This was similar to how, in Rogue One, we got to see some rebels cross serious ethical lines in order to take down the Empire. Again, this further shows how one arbitrary creed or way can have negative consequences when followed blindly. To summarize the rest of the episode, Mayfeld and Din narrowly make it to the base while avoiding some pirates attempting to destroy their transport. While inside the base, they find the terminal, but Mayfeld opts out of going to it as he recognizes a commanding officer he formerly served under when he was enlisted with the Empire. This requires Din to do the seemingly unthinkable. He goes to the terminal and removes his helmet due to the terminal requiring facial recognition in order to be accessed. Which at first I thought was strange because that means anyone could access that terminal, but then I realized that it probably is a measure in place simply to protect from droids slicing into the terminal like we see R2-D2 do so often in the saga trilogies, but I digress. In this moment, we see Din completely disregard his Mandalorian creed for the sake of doing what he knows is right, which I think is setting us up for something big next season. Unfortunately, however, the officer Mayfeld pointed out becomes suspicious and confronts Din at the terminal, forcing Mayfeld to step in and cover for Din, calling him Brown Eyes and giving him the excuse that he's hard of hearing. The officer finds Mayfeld humorous and offers Mayfeld and Din a drink. During their conversation, the officer irritates Mayfeld when talking about Operation Cinder, which was a main plot aspect of EA's Battlefront 2 in 2017 with Iden Versio. In Operation Cinder, the Empire obliterated entire Imperial metropolitan locations with giant orbital laser weapons, similar to how the Covenant glasses planets in Halo. This operation was a contingency plan made by Emperor Palpatine that was to be carried out as to punish the Empire for letting him fall, similar to how a game of chess is to end once the king perishes. It also served to bring the Imperial numbers to minimal capacity in order to rebuild undetected. This would eventually lead to the rise of the First Order as seen in the sequel trilogy. Anyways, this scene gives insight to Mayfeld's backstory as Operation Cinder was clearly his motivation for leaving the Empire and becoming a criminal. In fact, the officer's cold-hearted comments about that event offends Mayfeld to the point to where Mayfeld carelessly shoots the officer, completely blowing his and Din's cover. Despite this, Mayfeld and Din are able to narrowly escape with sniper aid from Fennec and Kara, while Boba was able to use Slave 1 to retrieve them from the base. While in the air, Mayfeld shoots the Rhydonium, blowing up the base. This leads to one of the coolest inclusions in The Mandalorian yet, as a pair of TIEs chased Boba's ship, only for him to unleash on them the coolest explosive in all of Star Wars, seismic charges, last seen used by Jango Fett against Obi-Wan Kenobi in Attack of the Clones. The episode concludes with Kara and Din showing gratitude towards Mayfeld by allowing him to escape by agreeing to feign his death in the recent explosion. After departing, Din, now with his usual Beskar back on, sends a chilling message to Moff Gideon letting him know he's coming for Grogu. So on some personal notes regarding this episode, first off, I thought there was a lot of really nice little touches in this episode. I thought that Boba's fresh coat of paint on his suit of armor was really cool. I also like how now he has his classic rifle equipped as opposed to the one blaster. The one blaster was awesome, but I always wondered what happened to that rifle. I'm also really excited to see how that rifle works, because in Return of the Jedi, we saw how that rifle, it was like a single shot, and a lot of, rifles probably have a single and burst shot mode, but whatever. What I'm really interested in is, because in video games, Boba's rifle is always a burst shot. So I'm wondering, just that little nerdy thing. I'm just trying to figure out, is it a burst shot? Does it use a single fire? Is it automatic? I don't know. And I'm really excited to see what it actually is. Another thought that I thought was really cool, little touch, is when they're in Slave 1 and Boba is launching, he's going in the air with Slave 1, we notice when they're talking in the ship, and they're sitting in their seats, they're not actually moving. So it's almost like the interior, which the people board the ship, actually is supposed to stay level in a way, where Slave 1, when it moves up, the ship and the interior don't actually move in the same angle. So I thought that was really cool. It was like a little thing. Something else I thought was awesome was the inclusion of Operation Cinder. That, to me, just goes to show, again, that the writers of this show are really being intentional on connecting everything. Because to me, that both legitimizes The Mandalorian, and it also legitimizes the campaign from Star Wars Battlefront 2. And on top of that, I would not be surprised if we maybe get an appearance from Iden Versio. We know that Iden Versio and Iden Versio's husband, I can't remember his name, I'm sorry, that they don't actually, their stories don't end until just before the sequel trilogy. So I'm really excited to see as to whether or not maybe they include them in the show. I'd love to see an appearance by them. I think that would be awesome. And it would bring a lot of people back to Battlefront 2, which they never should have ended for this reason. Also, obviously, like I said, seismic charges, amazing inclusion. We should have known we were going to get that as soon as we saw that the Slave 1 was essentially going to be the ship in place of the Razor Crest throughout the rest of this season, because I'm pretty sure it's almost guaranteed at this point that we're not going to see the Razor Crest, not for a while for sure. I also thought one nice little touch was at the very end when Din or the Mandalorian sent his message to Moff Gideon. That is the first that we've seen Moff Gideon show an expression of concern. I think that's just really cool how he knows, Din Djarin, they further establish his character as a dangerous character, and Moff Gideon's expression towards that message just further legitimizes that. And obviously, Din unmasking further develops his character as he slowly is learning that there's not only one way according to the Death Watch tradition. The way is the right way, which sometimes requires letting go of our traditions and some of our habits for the greater good. I believe this is going to lead, personally, to Death Watch becoming the next major antagonist in The Mandalorian, probably next season. As others have theorized, we'll probably learn that Death Watch is responsible for the death of Din's parents, so that they could acquire him as a foundling. Because for those of us who have seen Clone Wars and other aspects of Mandalorian canon since Disney's acquisition at least, Death Watch they're not good guys. I mean, they could change that. I'm not opposed to them changing that, and that maybe they're just anti-heroes or something, but they're not good guys. They've definitely used underhanded tactics to move forward, and I would not put it above Death Watch to kill parents with young children, to abduct the young children to raise them according to their way. And I would not be surprised if Din Djarin was one of those children. And honestly, I think that's a great idea, because that is a story you could really draw out. Obviously, Death Watch, although they're not the biggest faction in Star Wars, they're not small and insignificant either. That was the main faction that was under Darth Maul's reign near the end of the Clone Wars, at least the television series Clone Wars. And I would love to see that unveil. And I really do think that's the direction they're going. If they don't, obviously that's fine. I don't want to set my expectations too high, but that's where I think they're going. That's all I have for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe if you want to support the channel further. Have a great week.